Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're going to dive straight into the demographic reality of Washington. You've probably seen all the headlines recently about the health of some of our most prominent politicians, but today we want to look way past the breaking news alerts and just focus entirely on the data. Is our government actually getting older? What does the Constitution actually say about it? And maybe most importantly, what do the American people really want?
Okay, let's dive into this by looking at a recent case study that really brought this conversation to the absolute forefront of American politics. Back on July 12, 2026, 84-year-old Senator Mitch McConnell released a major health update. He stated, "I didn't break any bones or suffer a concussion, I didn't have a heart attack or a stroke, I'm regaining my strength." Now, this statement followed weeks of just intense public speculation, and it really highlighted the immense scrutiny placed on the health and longevity of our oldest legislative leaders.
To really grasp why that specific statement made such massive waves, let's objectively look at the medical timeline reported by the senator's office and his attending physicians. Right, so in February 2026, he was hospitalized for flu-like symptoms. Then over in June and July of that same year, he experienced a fall, was treated for mild pneumonia, and was actually briefly unconscious. He went through a whole battery of tests to rule out serious cardiac abnormalities. Ultimately, McConnell, who, by the way, has served in the Senate since 1984, announced he will step down and not seek re-election in 2026. This specific story of a powerful, long-serving leader stepping back, it sparked a much broader national conversation about the halls of power in Washington.
So the big question we have to ask ourselves now is Congress as a whole actually getting older, or are we just kind of hyper-focusing on a few high-profile senior figures who happen to make the evening news? Well, to answer this objectively, we need to step away from the individual stories and look at the macro-level demographic data. Fortunately for us, the researchers over at Legistorm have compiled the exact numbers we need to understand the true makeup of our legislative branch. 61.5. Now, that's not a grade, it's not a percentage. That is the current average age across the entire legislative branch in the 119th Congress. To put that stark number into perspective for you, the median age of the general American public is right around 39.1 years old. So our legislative body is, on average, over 2 entire decades older than the people it represents. But has it always been this way? Actually, no. Back in the 107th Congress, which started in 2001, the average age was 57. Today, in 2026, for the 119th Congress, it has crept all the way up to 61.5. So over the last 25 years, we've seen this steady upward demographic creep. Why does this matter? Well, according to the data, part of this is just due to the advantage of incumbency, which naturally allows for longer-serving members. But it also reflects a real shift in how we govern. Politics has increasingly become a later-in-life, established career path. People are entering Congress after spending decades building experience in entirely different fields.
Now, what's really interesting when you break down the data is the split between the two chambers. The House of Representatives holds an average age of 58, but over in the Senate, the average age jumps significantly to 65 years old. This actually aligns perfectly with historical patterns. The Senate was always designed by the founders to be the more senior, deliberative body. But right now, it is significantly older than the House, and it's continuing a long-term trend of rising age among its members.
Moving to the next section, the extremes. Oldest and youngest.
We've looked at the averages, but as we all know, averages can sometimes hide the real story. This clustering of octogenarians and nonagenarians brilliantly illustrates the immense power currently held by senior members in the Senate. Look at the very top. Senator Charles Grassley from Iowa is 92 years old. He was first elected in 1980 and is literally the longest-serving Republican in Senate history. Following closely are other deeply established leaders like Bernie Sanders at 84 and Mitch McConnell at 83. What you should really take away from this is that incredible longevity and institutional power are highly concentrated at the very top of the age bracket.
Then, on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, we have this number, 28. That is the age of Representative Maxwell Frost, a Democrat from Florida. He is the very first Gen Z member of Congress. When you compare his age to Senator Grassley's, you are looking at a massive 64-year age gap between the youngest and oldest members of our federal government. Think about that. They are legislating in the exact same era, voting on the exact same national issues, but they grew up in entirely different worlds. And this matters deeply to the everyday voter, because a 64-year age gap often translates into wildly differing generational priorities on things like emerging technology, long-term economic planning, and climate policy.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the next section, the rules and the polling.
To understand the current political debate happening across the country, we need to examine the actual laws governing age in Congress versus what the American public currently wants to see happen. Let's look at the rulebook, the United States Constitution. Article 1 sets very strict minimums. You have to be at least 25 years old to serve in the House and at least 30 to serve in the Senate. The founders explicitly designed this to ensure candidates possessed a certain level of maturity and experience before making laws. But notice that third point, maximum age limit. There isn't one. The absence of a constitutional cap reflects a principle of inclusivity. It was entirely intentional, meant to value lifelong wisdom and expertise, allowing individuals to contribute to the country regardless of their advanced years.
But does the modern voter actually agree with that 18th century logic? Well, a major 2023 poll by the Pew Research Center asked the American public a very direct question. Do you support maximum age limits for federal elected officials? The data we are about to look at reveals a stark, fascinating contrast between the current rules of the land and modern voters' sentiment. So the crucial point is there is overwhelming bipartisan agreement on this issue. 82% of Republicans and 76% of Democrats are in favor of maximum age limits for federal elected officials. In today's highly polarized political climate, finding an issue where roughly 80% of both major parties agree, that's incredibly rare. The American public across the board is clearly communicating that they believe an age cap absolutely should exist.
But look, wanting a rule change and actually getting it are two entirely different things. Because there is no current maximum age limit in the Constitution, enacting one requires a constitutional amendment. Walk through this strict mechanical reality with me for a second. Step 1, you have to formally draft the amendment. Step 2, you must secure a 2/3 supermajority vote in the House of Representatives. And Step 3, you have to secure a 2/3 supermajority vote in the Senate. This process was designed by the founders to make changing the Constitution incredibly difficult, requiring massive consensus.
Which brings us to the ultimate reality check. Knowing it requires a 2/3 vote from both chambers, will the oldest Congress in history ever vote to limit its own power? It's a fascinating paradox, really. The public overwhelmingly supports it, but the very people required to pass it are the ones who might be forced into retirement by it. I'll leave you to ponder the practical likelihood of those highly popular age limits ever becoming a reality. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.